Cool. So, welcome to the LGBTIQA plus hustings for the GPEx chair role. We have we have it in the main room here, so it's going to be me and Chris doing this for the next 20 minutes. It did look like we have both candidates here, John and Judy, which is incredibly good. Um, Obviously, we'll follow the same sort of format as what we've done previously, which is we will open up the questions to the floor after the candidates' opening statements. So I guess we'll do it how we've done it up until now, which is the candidate with the surname in alphabetical order will go down that list. So, Judy, your opening statement, please.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for organising this. And it must have been one heck of a big task, but well done. I don't know that I'll take up the full 2 minutes, but I do tend to go on a bit, so I hope I manage to fill it in a bit. I'm Judy Maciejowska. I live in West Devon, in the Tamar Valley, and that's in the border between right on the border between Devon and Cornwall. I'm chair of West Devon Green Party, and we elected five councillors at the last election, lost one when they moved, sadly, and lost it to the Liberal Democrats in the by-election. I'm also a parish councillor, and I'm not a district councillor, but I am a parish councillor. I've been a member of the party for over 40 years. Most of that time I lived in London, moved here from London about 14 or 15 years ago, where I chaired Richmond and Twickenham Green Party. I have to say it was a huge culture shock moving from a city, campaigning in a city where houses are next to each other and getting around is easy, to a very rural area. But it's been a good move, and I've enjoyed it. But what has been interesting is the political dynamic, which is so very different, particularly from Richmond, because around here, even Reform UK are seen as really rather glorious. Um, I've served on GPEx for several years. I was elections coordinator from I think 2009 to 2020, 2019, 2020. Can't remember, if I'm honest. I could look it up. And during that time it was the big surge. Of course, I managed the election that got Caroline elected, which was a huge breakthrough for us all. And through the Green surge in 2015, and a few elections after that as well. I stepped down and took a bit of a break from the governance roles, and came back onto GPRC as Southwest Rep a couple of years later. So I understand how the party works, sort of, because sometimes it doesn't work terribly well. And I think that's really why I wanted to come back onto GPEx as chair, because I am aware that the governance procedure, since we've grown hugely, bearing in mind that the constitution and the governance structure we have at the moment, we set up in 1990. I think it actually took place in 91. And obviously, although we've added bits and taken away, and it's changed slightly, it is now, since we've grown so very fast since then, the procedures are struggling. And so, I want to work with the other governance bodies to help improve things, make us so that we can all work more cohesively, because I am utterly convinced that if all the governance bodies are working, supporting each other, doing their own roles as they should be done according to the Constitution, and hopefully overcoming any of the difficulties that exist, then we'll all work an awful lot better. And one of the things I am very aware of is, that we'll disagree. We'll all disagree with things. Individuals will disagree, groups will disagree, because we're big. And that's not bad. It's good to disagree, and it's okay, because if we can disagree, we can discuss things in gentle ways. And I'm the wrong word for it, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. respectfully, and we can grow and we can learn, and that's how we can evolve as a party. In our introduction, in our email, I think from Chris, he said you have 2 minutes to say what you can give to LGBTIQA plus Greens. Oh gosh, I do get those letters muddled up. I'm sorry if I get them wrong, but it's not, don't mean to offend, but there are a lot of letters there. And you know what I would be able to do as chair of the executive. To be honest, I've thought about this, and I have to say, I don't want to tell you what I can do for you. I want you to say to GPEx and to me, if I'm elected chair, what you want from me, because you know, that's how we can learn from each other, and I will obviously do my very best to accommodate you. So that's really all I want to say. I have no promises to this group any more than I have to any others, but I do hope that I can learn from you if I'm elected. And that's all I have to say, but thank you very much for listening.
Cool. John, do you have an opening statement?
I do. Thank you. If I can find the unmute button. Thank you also for organising this. It's great. I'm sorry I wasn't able to attend the earlier session and hear some of the other candidates, because I had a meeting of the working group on the toolkit to heal divisions in the party, which is I think an important piece of work that was agreed by conference a few years ago. We're finally getting moving on that. I think that's probably a theme of some of the just looking at the questions that are coming up in the chat as well. There are a number of areas where I think we've started to make some real progress, but there are huge areas where we can go much further. And my reason for restanding, I thought quite seriously, having been on GPEx now for 6 years, first as treasurer and then for 3 years as chair, whether it was time to step down. And I feels at the moment like that we've just come off the back of a fantastically successful general election. We've just appointed our new chief exec, who is really hitting the ground running. We've got a very exciting election going on. We don't know who's going to be our new leadership team. There are real opportunities for the Green Party at the moment, and I'd really like to continue to play my part in helping us to seize those opportunities. One thing I will say, just as a little bit of personal introduction, I have done the opposite journey from Judy. My first membership of the party was in East Devon Green Party back in 1989. But I rejoined when I moved to London in 2000 and have been active in Islington Green Party since then. And as some of you may know, served as the party's chief executive in the run-up to the 2010 election when we elected Caroline as our first MP. And then as I was back on GPEx for the most recent elections when we obviously increased those to 4 MPs. I think I've probably had my 2 minutes, so I will pause now and let you ask your questions.
Cool, thanks. It looks like the first question here in chat is from Rachel Collinson, who has asked, why do you think that the party has yet to implement any of the recommendations in the Diverse Matters report, which was produced years ago, and what will you do about it? Let's start with you, Judy.
Rachel's absolutely right. It's perplexing actually how that seems to have been pushed around and rather buried as well. I don't remember how long it was that it was produced. I believe I was on GPEx at the time, maybe not. But it's quite right, and actually, you know, Rachel raising it has made me realise that I'd forgotten about it. That's wrong. I shouldn't have done, and I'll revisit it, because that's something that shouldn't have got lost. As I say, I haven't been on GPRC or GPEx for a couple of years now, so maybe things are happening that I don't know about, but I suspect they aren't. It would be worth working with the CEO. Maybe John knows better than I, but it'd be worth certainly working with the new CEO to see what we need to do. I imagine things have moved on a bit since then, but it wasn't very flattering actually. We need to recognise that there was some things identified in there that we shouldn't be very proud about, and well, we should be embarrassed about, frankly. And I think that we need to revisit it.
Cool. And John, your response?
Yeah, I mean, I would slightly challenge the premise of the question that I don't think it's fair to say that we haven't implemented any of the recommendations, but I would absolutely accept that we have not made as much progress as I would like us to have made in the past few years on these issues. I have my copy of the Diverse Matters report just out of reach, but it is by my desk because it is one of those things that we continually refer to, and it does inform the decisions that we are making. And at the meeting I was referring to earlier that I've just come from, we were talking again about how we make sure that we make use of the recommendations in that report when we're planning the next stage of work on the toolkit on healing divisions. And certainly one of the pieces of work that I'm most proud of the last year since the general election is the process for creating a pool of candidates for the next general election. And from the very beginning of planning that process, the values of the party, the absolute centrality of representation and inclusion and representing the diversity of the communities that we seek to represent has been part of that. And looking at how do we develop a pool of candidates, offer them the support and training that they need to ensure that when we are selecting our target constituencies and then selecting candidates to stand in those, we end up with a pool of people who are much more diverse and much more representative than our current parliamentarians. All of our parliamentarians do a fantastic job, but they would be the first to admit, and I've been in many meetings with them where they would, that they know we are largely, as it appears to the public, a white southern middle class party. And I know from meeting our much wider membership that's not how the party as a whole is, and it's certainly not how the country as a whole is. And we need to do, and we're starting to put in place the mechanisms to ensure that we support those communities that are underrepresented in the party, and support people who might be less confident and less willing to put themselves forward to enable them to do so. And that's a key part of it. There's lots more to the Diverse Matters report, but I'm sure we've got other questions to come on to.
Cool. I will pass over to Chris, who will pick the next question.
Yeah, thanks for those answers, and thanks, Melissa. I'm just going to try and ask these questions as they appear in the chat in order. So, a question from Ash Ralph. Question for all GPEx candidates, but we're only in one meeting at the moment. Are you on the list of the founding signatories of Green Women's Declaration? And if so, why? So I'll ask that to John, first of all.
I'm not.
Thank you. And Judy?
I read in the chat that it's a transphobic declaration, and I hope it's not. I'm a bit bothered by that, because if it really is, I don't want to be involved with it. I hope that I'm not transphobic. I don't believe I am. If I fall at hurdles, I hope that you will tell me so. And as I say, I'm a feminist. I was brought up under a very patriarchal setup. I was born a while back, and things were ridiculously ridiculous for women in those days, and that is the background that I have. For instance, my mother wasn't allowed to have a bank account, and I wasn't allowed to have a passport unless my father told me I could. That's the sort of background that I come from. So I am that sort of a feminist. If I'm honest, I don't actually believe I ever signed the Green Women's Declaration. but I was signed onto it, and I'm not quite sure, but I didn't come off it. I was perfectly happy to be a signatory of it. But I really hope that it isn't a transphobic document. If it is, please point it out to me so that I can address it and see if I still want to be involved with it. But there you have it.
Thank you, Melissa.
Cool, yeah. So the next one seems to be from Clem, from Manchester Green Party. Their question is, what is your assessment of what happened to those who have been kicked out of the party, particularly those campaigned for trans-exclusionary radical feminism, and what changes will you make, if any, going forward? I will pass that to John.
So the first part of that's quite difficult to answer because there are a number of people who, for various reasons, have been subject to disciplinary processes and have ended up being expelled from the party. And the executive is quite deliberately, in our constitution, firewalled from those disciplinary processes. So it's really quite hard for me to comment on the reasons why individuals have been expelled. In terms of the changes, though, I think one of the things that's become clear over the last few years is that there are improvements we could make to a number of processes within the party. I've been, in my role as chair, part of the process of reviewing the code of conduct, and also working group of the regional council that's working with the disciplinary committee to update the standing orders for party discipline, which obviously works alongside the code of conduct, to make sure that the processes are meeting all of our values as a party, but also all of the legal requirements that are on us in terms of having a fair process. And in some form or another, those will be coming to conference this autumn, and hopefully we can make some progress there. The other thing which is particularly important is these processes are incredibly reliant on volunteers in the party. And one of the things that we've agreed as GPEx in the last budget was an increase in the staffing budget in the team that supports those volunteers to make sure that they have access to professional advice, they have access to legal advice, and they're not kind of left stranded as volunteers trying to deal with some of the most difficult issues that we as a party deal with. I'm absolutely going to put my hands up and say we haven't put enough resource into that. It needs more resource, but we put in as much as we could afford at the state the party is in at the moment. And we're absolutely committed to continuing to increase that support, as well as looking at how we can strengthen the frameworks and policies that we use to ensure that members are following the code of conduct and those who don't are treated fairly and appropriately.
Cool. And Judy.
Yeah, I didn't hear the question very clearly. Would you mind repeating it?
Yeah, sure. So what is your assessment of what happened to those who have been kicked out of the party, particularly those campaigned for trans-exclusionary radical feminism, and what changes will you make, if any, going forwards?
Right. I don't like. I'll be honest with you. I don't like the way that we are suspending or expelling people so readily. No, I mean, that's not to say that some people are putting the party. I'm not putting it. Hang on. Let's go back to the beginning. I'm talking too many negatives here. Some people, if people are genuinely putting the party at risk, either reputationally or causing, likely to cause harm to other members of the party, then they must be removed from the party, no question. But I have been concerned at the numbers of people who have been removed from the party, seemingly for fairly minor infringements. I note that the question talked about trans-exclusionary radical feminists. I don't know whether some of these people are or are not, but it hasn't in many cases been because of their feminism and their views on trans rights that they have been that as far as I'm aware that they have been excluded from the party. It's been for something fairly minor, and I'm concerned that there's been too much of a rush to remove people. I really feel that we ought to be able to, as I said before, it's okay to disagree. It is okay to disagree. It's not okay to upset people and be nasty to people and be disrespectful. No, it isn't. But in so many cases, a lot of people will say, "I'm sorry, I didn't realise it." And there are ways within the standing orders for party discipline at the moment of dealing with that. There's the alternative disputes route. There is the you can get people to take training on on safety and there are a lot of training courses that people can go on. I would far sooner that than lose people who are good activists, good Greens in so many other ways. But if they fall foul of something in the code of conduct, they more often than not they should be able to be pulled up. If that doesn't work, then yes, goodbye. But I don't think that should be the first way of dealing with them. I don't like it. It upsets me. I'm not that kind of a person myself. I like to think the best of people. And if I disagree with somebody, yeah, I might go and shout in a corner about them. But I think that's usually not the best way of dealing with it.
Cool, thanks for your answers. I think we'll try and squeeze one more question in, Chris, and then we'll go to closing statements afterwards.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thanks. Question from Annie Townsend. How will you ensure equity of local parties and marginalised demographics in the party to be heard, acknowledged and represented in both internal and external positions? Let's start with Judy.
I only just unmuted and muted now unmute. I think obviously local parties are autonomous in so many ways, and I think Annie talked about how it would run in local parties. I think also regions must play a much more a much stronger role in this sort of building of supporting local parties and building local teams within the regions and locally. I think I have an idea that Annie might also have asked about for national posts as well. Is that right, Chris? Yeah, it's an interesting one because I think I said in the questionnaire that you sent out earlier that I feel everybody has a right to stand for every position. I'm not in favour. Having said that, I know that I'm about to say I'm not in favour of promoting one minority over another. Having said that, I was always in favour of women having women and obviously trans women having giving them additional places in internal elections. So that I'm not. If I'm honest, no. I want everybody to be able to apply for posts and in the proper way. There may be a different way of doing it, in which case probably I would want to work with your group and any others, say maybe Disability Greens and other special interest groups to find a way through. I haven't got an answer. I'm sorry, I'm fluffing here. I don't have an answer, but there must be one. And yeah, I'd be happy to hear it. At the moment, you can hear I'm not that in favour of it, but there probably is. I'm probably wrong.
Thanks, Judy. Just point out, I think you meant to say women including trans women rather than women and trans women.
I'm sorry. Yes.
John, your answer.
Yes, thanks for the question. Like I said earlier, one of the things that I think I'm most proud of in the last year has been the work to seek out and encourage a much broader range of people to put themselves forward for the programme of training and support that we're going to be offering for potential candidates for the next round of target parliamentary seats. I think we've done as a party much better in terms of our councillor groups now starting to look like they reflect the communities that they are serving. That's there's still a huge way to go, but I think that's an area where we can look to for good practice. And I was really pleased to come down to Bristol last autumn for the Association of Green Councillors Conference to talk to them about the work that's being done and where the local parties that are really succeeding in broadening the representation and ensuring that their council groups reflect their communities, so that we can learn from that for planning for future elections at whatever level. I think where there is a much bigger challenge for us is internally. We haven't historically managed to support minoritized communities and marginalized communities to stand for internal posts. Partly that's a challenge of these being volunteer roles, and so people who are already facing a number of challenges in their lives for reasons of the unequal structure of society rather than any fault of their own, are always going to find it much more difficult to put themselves forward and to have the resources to engage in something like this than someone who has the privilege that I have. And that's absolutely something that we have to challenge, and that's something we have to look at how we can work. I am really pleased to see the range of candidates who are standing for GPEx this time. It's much more reflective of the party and society as a whole than it has been for many, many years. But that's part of a much broader piece of work. And as I say, I think there's been some progress, but there's huge amounts more work to do. And it's absolutely part of my platform for restanding as chair to continue that work and build on it.
Cool, thanks for that. And yeah, just going on to closing statements, ideally try and be quick, like 90 seconds each, just because we want to try and finish up by 9. So Judy.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Melissa, there's something very wrong with my speaker. Can you repeat it again? I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, I was just, do you have a closing statement? And just to try and keep it nice and brief, 90 seconds, because we want to kind of try and be done by 9. Thanks.
Of course, thank you. Yeah, I don't have a lot to say, but thank you very much. I do realise that you know, for some of you, I must not be the most sympathetic to your cause, but believe me, I am. My background is not obvious to be obviously sympathetic to you, but I certainly am. There is something that Ash has put in the chat about me and Green Women's Declaration. I'm not quite sure what that is. Maybe Ash and I can talk about it later, because I'm really not an active with Green Women's Declaration at all. And so he's suggested she is. I'm sorry, Ash. She is suggesting that that it was less than honest. I hope I wasn't less than honest. But thank you very much. I've been very pleased to see you all this evening, and good luck with all that you're doing in the future. But thank you.
Cool. And then on to you, John.
Yeah, thanks very much again for putting on this hustings. No, when I came in, you were talking about the work that's been involved, and when I looked at the timetable for this evening and your next session, I did think that's a mammoth husting. So congratulations. I think it's indicative of the contribution that the LGBTQIA+ community makes to the party. You know, you are one of the most active special interest groups, and I think it's fair to say that this community is one of the communities that is well represented at all levels in the party, as you know, both in our public elected office and internally. And there, as I said earlier about learning from the councillors, there are many things we can learn from groups like this community, but also some of the other special interest groups, liberation groups. And that's absolutely, I think I said in another questionnaire, that the one thing that I would do differently in my last 3 years is to be more proactive in engaging in with special interest communities, because my engagement has tended to be a reaction to crises rather than having the time to make that proactive engagement. And there's so much wisdom and so much experience in our special interest groups, our liberation communities, that I'm really aiming to be much more proactively engaged with you and with the other groups if I'm lucky enough to be re-elected. So thank you very much for your time.
Cool, thanks. And thank you for coming to our hustings. Big credit to you guys. And I know that obviously the GPEx chair has not been really one that's been largely invited with just it being leadership. So thanks for making time for us.